All right, we're going to get started. Good morning, everyone. I'm Matthew Cherry, TABC Senior Counsel. We do have a number of agenda items this morning, but I do want to remind everyone, these are just initial drafts to get feedback from industry. None of these rules have been proposed at a commission meeting yet. We do intend to propose these rules at the next commission meeting. And then after that point in time, there will be another public hearing to provide additional feedback and another formal comment period. So this is not your only opportunity to provide any feedback. These are just our initial drafts. Please be mindful that I may not be able to answer all questions. This morning, some questions I may need to discuss with staff and leadership before we give any responses. So really, we're just going to receive feedback today. And then lastly, please do try to submit any feedback that you have by October 18th. That way we can discuss internally, make any adjustments if needed, and then gives us some time to be able to make those adjustments before presenting a draft to the commission. And with that said, I will start with our first agenda item. So up first is Chapter 33, subchapters A through G. And the first rule is 33.2. So all this does is remove some unnecessary text that refers to certain forms. This just aligns better with our current Ames process, which is not a paper form anymore, as everyone knows. So mostly all applications are submitted online. And then next we have a proposed amendment to 33.10. What we've done here is remove subsection B1 and then made conforming changes to subsections 2 and 3 to make those now 1 and 2. This is a non-substantive change. It really just conforms with the way that section 10953 of the code currently reads. Back in 2019 in House Bill 1545, the legislature removed the reference to brewers from 109.53. And so we're doing the same thing here just to make sure that the rule is still in line with the statutory text. But again, this does not change or impact any of our current processes or enforcement of that section. Next is Rule 33.23. And so all we've done here is remove the 2-day minimum requirement for NETI authorizations. By current practice, if a applicant requests a NETI for only 1 day, licensing has been approving those. So we're just removing this 2-day minimum requirement. Next is 33.44. The only change here is in subsection B. And all this does is change the reference to Rule 41.42 to now state 41.39. And that's just because the appropriate rule for the excise tax bond amounts was moved not long ago. So we're just changing to make sure that it cites the proper rule. Next is 33.45. So all we've done here, again, these are also non-substantive changes. To just remove references to the old chapters 12 and 13 for that old brewer's permit. This was all in place before the ledge went and merged ale and beer into malt beverages and then got rid of the brewer's permit and created that brewer's license. So all these changes just removed references to the permit. And then in subsection A, we removed all the references to the code sections that are no longer existent in the code, and then just referenced the 2 main provisions that actually authorize alternating brewery proprietorships and contract brewing arrangements. Next is 33.57. So what we've done here for application withdrawals, currently the rule has a 10 business day timeline. And because Ames is a 24-hour system that allows people to submit documents, applications, interface with agency personnel 24 hours a day, we've changed that to go from business days to calendar days. Next is 33.75. So this is just one of those other changes where there was a reference to another rule and that rule has moved. So we're updating that reference. So it was 35.31 for place and manner. And now that rule appears in rule section 34.3. So we've just made a conforming change there. Next is 33.93. So what we've done here, and I'll go over this a little bit later when we get on to the agenda item for chapter 50. So within this rule currently, there is a notification requirement that does pertain to seller server certificates. And so we thought it was best to remove that from the licenses and permits subchapter and move that over to the actual chapter covering seller server. And then next we have 33.100. And so you'll see a bunch of changes within this subchapter G, but these are also non-substantive changes. All we've done here is a bunch of cleanup to remove unnecessary text and then to make it more readable. So the first change is within subsection A. What we've done here is added some language to subsections A and B to just better track the statute. And then we have also removed subsection C as it's unnecessary because now 33-105 does state that there is no right to an appeal, and so there's no need to have that reference in there anymore. And then we've also removed 33.101 in its entirety. This is actually just somewhat redundant. It's already clear within 33.100 subsection B, the authority of the executive director. So we've just removed that entire rule. There are no changes to 33.102. And then in 33.103, all we've done here is add some additional language to better track the statutory text in section 11.614 of the Alcoholic Beverage Code. And then also we've added a reference at the very end in this last sentence to state that the decision that's rendered by the ALJ is final. And what that's done is allow us to then also just repeal in its entirety Rule 33.105. There's no need to reference that appeal because it's stated now with this change in 33.103 that the ALJ's decision is final. And then lastly, we've made a slight change to the text in 33.104 subsection 4. That just changed the word order to suspension, just for clarity, because it's actually, that's what that term is under the order. It's a term of suspension. And then, yeah, now I will open up for any questions. So it looks like you're asking, will we receive copies of these rules and changes? Yes, if you go on our public website right now, if you scroll down to the bottom, there'll be a part of the page that says agency meetings. If you go to that, there'll be an entire blurb that talks about this stakeholder meeting, and then it also includes drafts of all of these documents.
Marcus Schwartz has a question.
Marcus.
Hey, Matthew. Good morning to you. Two general comments. One on 3357, which is the application withdrawal, changing it from 10 business days to 10 calendar days. I get this is discretionary, but here's my kind of, nightmare scenario. Say I get a request December 20th. And it involves the surrender of a third party's permit because my applicant is taking over, a location and operating under an interim agreement. Good luck in 10 business days at the end of December getting a third party to surrender their permit within 10 days when it's all holidays and the like. So I just note that generally, I don't think your licensing would withdraw applications in that case, but they have the power to under this rule. So I would just note that.
All right. Well, thank you for the comment. It is noted.
And then my only other comment is on, while we're looking at these rules, 3393, the change of mailing address.
Yes.
The current state of Ames is that to change a mailing address, it has to be done permit by permit. Can't be a bulk change right now. So, and I've had this come across where a large client with a ton of permits, 100 plus permits, needs to change their mailing address. Well, to do that in 7 business days for 500 permits, you're doing it 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you may not be able to even do it, frankly. So maybe you just put something add on the end, absent a special dispensation by the agency or something along the lines where we can work with you and say, hey, big change, and it's a temporary thing until we get both changes in age for mailing addresses.
Okay, no, that makes perfect sense. Noted. Thank you.
Those are my only 2 comments. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions before we move on to the next agenda item? I'm not seeing anything, so we will move on to agenda item number 2. This is going to cover chapter 45, subchapters A through E. So the first rule that we have proposed amendment to is 45.9 for withdrawal of applications for product registration. So all of these changes right here, this mirrors the rule that we were just going over in chapter 33 for licenses and applications. So we brought that same process over to the product registration applications. Next change is in rule 45.11. So all we've done here, you'll see there's a deletion to the word federal before it appears before the term COLA. So we removed that because we already have a definition at the beginning of this chapter that does define a COLA, and it already defines it as that federal certificate of label approval. So having federal in there was redundant, and then also it's inconsistent because there's other times that these rules will just refer to a COLA without that word. So for clarity, we removed that. And then we've added a slight change in subsections 8 and 9. That "and" for the list just needed to be moved down one extra subsection, so we've made that conforming change. And then lastly, in subsection D here, there's just a slight change to the naming convention. The rules previously referred to the certificate of registration, which is how we were referring to that certificate or that label approval before Sunset went and made those changes to the product registration process, and where we now adopt the COLA. And currently what we issue is a certificate of product registration. So just changing that naming convention. And then next change is in Rule 45.12. The only change here is in subsection E, and that's the same thing I just talked about. We've removed the word federal before it appears before the word COLA. And then next change is in Rule 45.20. All we've done here is, again, just change the name of that certificate to the product registration certificate. And here, the prior rule that talked about the exhibiting a certificate to the representative of the commission, it used to refer to the COLA, but we thought it was best now to have that refer actually to our product registration certificate. We don't believe that most people, when they are around, are holding on to their COLA to then provide over to the agency. Well, the first thing we're going to look at is our own certificate of product registration. So we've just made a conforming change with that there. And then next is in Rule 45.23. So this rule refers to alteration of labels. All we've done here is added in after it refers to the executive director to state that upon request to alter a label, that could be issued and approved either by the executive director or the executive director's designee. And the next change is in 45.30. And also there's the same changes in 45.40 and 45.50. And these are also not, these changes are not of any sort of substance. They don't change any current processes or practices. It's a bunch of cleanup just to the current process for applying for a product registration for the different classes of alcoholic beverages. And that covers all of those changes to subchapter D. And so next is, oh, sorry, that is and E. So that is all that we have for chapter 45, subchapters A through E. So I'll open the floor to any questions.
Hey, Matthew Marcus again. I got a question on this from the client, and I don't think this is the case, but, and you may not know, but these tweaks to these various rules, they're not in any way intended to, affect in any way how currently the agency deals with use up requests and grants. Is that correct? Okay.
Yep, this is all just cleanup for better readability and for clarity.
Understood. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, any other questions on agenda item number 2? All right, I'm going to move on. Next up is agenda item 3. So this is a proposed change to Rule 50.24. So this is the change that I was talking about previously in agenda item 1 in chapter 33 for that change of address notification. So that when it pertains to the seller server schools, that's now been moved over to this new amended Rule 50.24, just because that's the appropriate chapter for making changes or notifying the seller server division of any changes to your address. That covers all of the changes for item 3, so I'll open the floor to any questions. All right, I'm not seeing anything. I'm going to move on to our last agenda item. So agenda item number 4 covers proposed changes to Rule 45.105, which does cover advertising. And primarily what we've done here is made changes to subsection A, which is covering outdoor advertising. So currently under the code right now, as it reads, 108.51 provides a definition of outdoor advertising. Then it also provides the definition for billboards and electric signs. Then if you move on down to the next statute in 108.52, the code says that all outdoor advertising is prohibited unless the agency approves it by rule. So currently, if you were to look at 45.105 and read subsection A, all it does is create a prohibition against putting prices on anything that's going to be an outdoor advertisement. So one would have to make an inference by that prohibition that some outdoor advertising is automatically authorized. So what we've done here is try to remove any confusion and remove, the need to make that type of inference, and then just clearly state that retail licensees and permittees may, in accordance with this rule, erect to maintain outdoor advertising at their premises. And then the next subsections, we've just made conforming changes to the numbering, so everything lines up appropriately. And then lastly, we have two changes in a new subsection 5 and a new subsection 6. So what we've done in subsection 5 here is just try to reiterate and reflect the code's prohibitions on forms of inducements, which also relate to Rule 45.110. And then specifically, the prohibited payments for a particular placement of advertising. So we added that in to make it clear that all of this outdoor advertising and any of the billboards and the electric signs that are authorized under the rule, a member of the upper tier cannot pay a retailer for some sort of specific placement of that type of advertising. And then as an extension of that, we've added this subsection A6. And so this does relate to A5 and that prohibition. So what we wanted to do here is acknowledge that currently under rules 45.113 and 45.117, upper tier members are authorized to furnish, give, or sell certain interior signs to retailers. So we made that acknowledgement, but then also wanted to make it clear that even though those signs are authorized to be sold to the retailer, the sale of that sign is not the same thing as the prohibited type of payment in subsection A5. And then lastly, we've added a statement at the very end of this that retailers may use those interior signs for outdoor advertising purposes on the exterior walls or enclosure where the license of the permit is issued. We pulled that language straight from the statute just to make it clear that once those signs are provided, as long as they're done in accordance with rules 45.113 and 45.117, then the retailer, is free to use those, and they can use those as outdoor advertising on the building if they choose to do so. And that covers all of our proposed changes for Rule 45.105. I will open the floor up to any questions or comments. I'm not seeing anything. If anyone has a question or comment on any of the other agenda items, the floor is open for that as well. All right, I'm not seeing anything, so that will conclude our meeting today. As I said at the very beginning of this, please try to submit any feedback and comments that you have by October 18th to give us time to look at those and then make adjustments if needed to prepare the rule drafts to propose to the commission at November commission meeting. All right, thank you everyone for your time today. Appreciate it. Have a great one.